upon your bed while the moon is in the sky. Stay awake, don't close your eyes. Though the world is fast asleep, though your pillows soft and deep, you're not sleepy as you seem. Stay awake, don't nod and dream. Stay awake, don't nod and dream. You're not sleepy as you seem. Stay awake, don't nod and dream. Stay awake, don't nod and dream.
Hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Quarantine Party Line. You're probably asking yourself several questions. You're probably asking, "Hey, when will this COVID-19 stuff be over?" Or maybe you're asking yourself, "When will I be able to see my friends and family again?" Maybe even, how will this affect the world economy? But right now, you're probably asking yourself, "Hey, what's that goddamn sound in the background?" I only have the answer to the last question. And the answer is, it's my air conditioner. It's a hot summer night here in mid-Michigan. And like many of you, I've been having some trouble sleeping lately. The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Chapter 1. The Riverbank. The mole had been working very hard all the morning, spring cleaning his little home. First with brooms, then with dusters, then on ladders and chairs, with a brush and a pail of whitewash, till he had dust in his throat and eyes, and splashes of whitewash all over his black fur, and an aching back and weary arms. Spring was moving in the air above, and in the earth below and around him, penetrating even his dark and lowly home, with its spirit of divine discontent and longing. It was small wonder, then, that he suddenly flung down his brush on the floor, said bother, and oh blow, and also hang spring cleaning, and bolted out of the house without even waiting to put on his coat. Something up above was calling imperiously, and he made for the steep little tunnel which answered in his case to the gravelled carriage drive owned by animals whose residences are nearer to the sun and air. And scratched and scrabbled and scrooged, and then he scrooged again and scrabbled until at last, pop, his snout came out into the sunlight, and he found himself rolling in the warm grass of a great meadow. "This is fine," he said to himself. "This is better than whitewashing." The sunshine struck hot on his fur, soft breezes caressed his heated brow, and after the seclusion of the cellarage he had lived in so long, the carol of hell on his dulled hearing almost like a shout. Jumping off all his forelegs at once, in the joy of living in the delight of spring without its cleaning, he played across the meadow till he reached the hedge on the further side. "Hold up!" said an elderly rabbit at the gap. "Sicklage of passing by the private road." He was bowled over in an instant by the impatient and contemptuous mole, who trotted along the side of the hedge, chaffed the rabbits as they peeped hurriedly from their holes to see what the row was about. Onion sauce," he remarked jeeringly, and was gone before they could think of a thoroughly satisfactory reply. Then they all started grumbling at each other. "How stupid you are! Why didn't you tell him? Well, why didn't you say? You might have reminded him," and so on, in the usual way, but of course it was then much too late, as is always the case. It all seemed too good to be true. Hither and thither through the meadows he rambled busily, along the hedgerows, across the copses, finding everywhere birds building, flowers budding, leaves thrusting, everything happy and progressive and occupied. And instead of having an uneasy conscience pricking him and whispering, "Whitewash!" How could only feel how jolly it was to be the only idle dog among all these busy citizens. After all, the best part of a holiday is perhaps not so much to be resting as to see all the other fellows busy working. He thought his happiness was complete when, as he meandered aimlessly along, suddenly he stood by the edge of a full-fed river. Never in his life had he seen a river before. This sleek, sinuous, full-bodied animal, chasing and chuckling, gripping things with a gurgle and leaving them with a laugh, to fling itself on fresh playmates that shook themselves free and were caught and held again. All was a shake and a shiver, glints and gleams and sparkles, rustle and swirl, chatter and bubble. Witched, entranced, fascinated. By the side of the river he trotted as one trots when very small, by the side of a man who holds one spellbounding stories, and when tired at last, he sat on the bank while the river still chattered on to him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world, sent from the heart of the earth to be told at last to the insatiable sea. As he sat across the river, a dark hole in the bank opposite, just above the water's edge, caught his eye, and dreamily he fell to considering what a nice snug dwelling place it would make for an animal once, and fond of a riverside residence, above flood level and remote from noise and dust. As he gazed, something bright and small seemed to twinkle down in the heart of it, vanished, then twinkled once more like a tiny star. But it could hardly be a star in such an unlikely situation, and it was too glittering and small for a glowworm. Then, as he looked, it winked at him, and so declared itself to be an eye, and a small face began gradually to grow up round it like a frame round a brown little face with whiskers, a grave round face with the same twinkle in its eye that had first attracted his notice. small, neat ears and thick, silky hair. It was the water rat. Then the two animals stood and regarded each other cautiously. "Hello, Mole," said the water rat. "Hello, Rat," said the Mole. "Would you like to come over?" inquired the rat presently. "Oh, it's all very well to talk," said the Mole rather pettishly, he being new to a river and riverside life and its ways. The rat said nothing, but stooped and unfastened a rope and hauled on it, then lightly stepped into a little boat which the Mole had not observed. It was painted blue outside and white within, and was just the size for two animals, and the Mole's whole heart went out to it at once, even though he did not yet fully understand its uses. The rat sculled smartly across, and then he held up his forepaws. The Mole stepped gingerly down. "Lean on that," he said. "Now then, step lively." And the Mole, to his surprise and rapture, actually seated in the stern of a real boat. "This has been a wonderful day," said he, as the rat shoved off and took to the sculls again. "I've never been in a boat before in all my life." "What?" cried the rat, open-mouthed. "Never been in a... Well, What have you been doing, then?" "Is it so nice as all that?" asked the Mole shyly, though he was quite prepared to believe it as he leant back in his seat and surveyed the cushions, the oars, the rowlocks, and all the fascinating fittings, and felt the boat sway lightly under him. "Nice? It's the only thing," said the water rat solemnly, as he leant forward for his stroke. "Believe me, my young friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing up. Simply messing," he went on dreamily. "Messing about in boats. Messing? Look ahead, Rat!" cried the Mole suddenly. It was too late. The boat struck the bank full tilt. The dreamer, the joyous oarsman, lay at the bottom of the boat, his heels in the air. "About in boats or with boats," the rat went on composedly, picking himself up with a pleasant laugh. "In or out of 'em, it doesn't matter. Nothing seems really to matter. That's the charm of it. Whether you get away or whether you don't, whether you arrive at your destination or whether you reach somewhere else, or whether you never get anywhere at all, you're always busy and you never do anything in particular. And when you've done it, there's always something else to do. And you can do it if you like, but you'd much better not. Look here, if you've really nothing else on hand this morning, supposing we drop down the river together and have a long day of it." The Mole waggled his toes from sheer happiness, spread his chest with a sigh full of contentment, and leaned back blissfully into the soft cushions. "What a day I'm having," he said. "Let us start at once." "Hold hard a minute, then," said the rat. He looped the painter through a ring in his landing stage, climbed up into his hole above, and after a short interval, reappeared staggering under a fat wicker luncheon basket. "Shove that under your feet," he observed to the Mole as he passed it down into the boat. Then he untied the painter and took the sculls again. "What's inside it?" asked the Mole, wriggling with curiosity. "There's cold chicken inside it," replied the rat briefly. "Cold tongue, cold ham, cold beef, pickled salad, French rolls, crusts and sandwiches, spotted meat, ginger beer, lemonade, soda water." "Oh, stop, stop!" cried the Mole in ecstasies. "That is too much." "Do you really think so?" inquired the rat seriously. "It's only what I always take on these little excursions, and the other animals are always telling me that I'm a mean beast and cut it very fine." The Mole never heard a word he was saying. Absorbed in the new life he was entering upon, intoxicated with the sparkle, the ripple, the scents and the sounds and the sunlight, he trailed a paw in the water and dreamed long, waking dreams. The water rat, like the good little fellow he was, sculled steadily on and forbore to disturb him. "I like your clothes awfully, old chap," he remarked after some half an hour or so had passed. "I'm going to get a black velvet smoking suit myself some day, soon as I can afford it." "I beg your pardon," said the Mole, pulling himself together with an effort. "You must think me very rude, but all this is so new to me." "So this is a river." "The river," corrected the rat. "And you really live by the river? What a jolly life." "By it, and with it, and on it, and in it," said the rat. It's brother and sister to me, and aunts and company and food and drink and, naturally, washing. It's my world, and I don't want any other. What it hasn't got is not worth having, and what it doesn't know is not worth knowing. Lord, the times we've had together, whether in winter or summer, spring or autumn, it's always got its fun and its excitements. When the floods are on in February and my cellars and basement are brimming with drink, that's no good to me, and the brown water runs by my best bedroom window. Or again, when it all drops away and shows patches of mud that smells like plum cake, and the rushes and weed clog the channels, and I can potter about dry shod over most of the bed of it, and find fresh food to eat, and things careless people have dropped out of boats. But isn't it a bit dull at times? The mole ventured to ask. Just you and the river? And no one else to pass a word with? No one else to... But I mustn't be hard on you, said the rat with forbearance. You're new to it, and of course you don't know. The bank is so crowded nowadays that many people are moving away altogether. Oh no, it isn't what it used to be at all. Otters, kingfishers, dabchicks, moorhens, all of them about all day long and always wanting you to do something. As if a fellow had no business of his own to attend to. What lies over there? Asked the mole, waving a paw towards a background of woodland that darkly framed the water meadows on one side of the river. That? Oh, that's just the wild wood, said the rat shortly. We don't go there very much, we riverbankers. Aren't they very nice people in there? Said the mole, a trifle nervously. Well, replied Rat, let me see. The squirrels are all right. And the rabbits. Some of them. But the rabbits are a mixed lot. And there's Badger, of course. He lives right in the heart of it. Wouldn't live anywhere else either if you paid him to do it. Dear old Badger. Nobody interferes with him. And they'd better not, he added significantly. Why? Who should interfere with him? Asked the mole. Well, of course, there are others, explained the rat in a hesitating sort of way. Weasels and stoats and foxes and so on. They're all right in a way. I'm very good friends with them, past the time of day when we meet and all that. But they break out sometimes. There's no denying it. And then you can't really trust them, and that's the fact. The mole knew well that it is quite against animal etiquette to dwell on possible trouble ahead or even allude to it, so he dropped the subject. And beyond the wild wood again? He asked. Where it's all blue and dim and one sees what may be hills or perhaps there mayn't and something like the smoke of towns? Or is it only cloud drift? Beyond the wild wood comes the wide world, said the rat. And that's something that doesn't matter either to you or me. I've never been there and I'm never going. Nor you either, if you've got any sense at all. Don't ever refer to it again, please. Now then. Here's our backwater at last, where we're going to lunch. Leaving the main stream, they now passed into what seemed at first like a little landlocked lake. Green turf sloped down to either edge, brown snaky tree roots gleamed below the surface of the quiet water, while ahead of them the silvery shoulder and foamy tumble of a weir, arm in arm with a restless dripping mill wheel that held up in its turn a grey-gabled millhouse, filled the air with a soothing murmur of sound, dull and smothery, yet with little clear voices speaking up cheerfully out of it at intervals. It was so very beautiful that the mole could only hold up both forepaws and gasp, "Oh my, oh my, oh my." The rat brought the boat alongside the bank, made her fast, helped the still awkward mole safely ashore, and swung out the luncheon basket. The mole begged as a favor to be allowed to unpack it all by himself, and the rat was very pleased to indulge him and to sprawl at full length on the grass and rest, while his excited friend shook out the tablecloth and spread it, took out all the mysterious packets one by one, and arranged their contents in due order, still gasping, "Oh my, oh my," at each fresh revelation. Excuse me. At each fresh revelation. When all was ready, the rat said, "Now pitch in, old fellow," and the mole was indeed very glad to obey. For he had started his spring cleaning at a very early hour that morning, as people will do, and had not paused for bite or sup, and he had been through a very great deal since that distant time, which now seemed so many days ago. "What are you looking at?" said the rat presently, when the edge of their hunger was somewhat dulled, and the mole's eyes were able to wander off the tablecloth a little. "I am looking," said the mole, "at a streak of bubbles that I see traveling along the surface of the water. That is a thing that strikes me as funny." "Bubbles? Oh-ho!" said the rat, and chirruped cheerily in an inviting sort of way. A broad, glistening muzzle showed itself above the edge of the bank, and the otter hauled himself out and shook the water from his coat. "Greedy beggars," he observed, making for the provender. "Why didn't you invite me, Ratty?" "This was an impromptu affair," explained the rat. "By the way, my friend Mr. Mole." "Proud, I'm sure," said the otter, and the two animals were friends forthwith. "Such a rumpus everywhere," continued the otter. "All the world seems out on the river today. I came up this backwater to try and get a moment's peace and stumble upon you fellows. At least, I beg pardon. I don't exactly mean that, you know." There was a rustle behind them, proceeding from a hedge wherein last year's leaves still clung thick, and a stripy head, with high shoulders behind it, peered forth on them. "Come on, old badger," shouted the rat. The badger trotted forward a pace or two, then grunted, "Company," and turned his back and disappeared from view. "That's just the sort of fellow he is," observed the disappointed rat. "Simply hates society. Now we shan't see any more of him today. Well, tell us, who's out on the river?" "Toad's out, for one," replied the otter. "In his brand new wager boat, new togs, new everything." The two animals looked at each other and laughed. "Once it was nothing but sailing," said the rat. "Then he tired of that and took to punting. Nothing would please him but to punt all day and every day, and a nice mess he made of it. Last year it was houseboating, and we all had to go and stay with him in the houseboat and pretend we liked it. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a houseboat. It's all the same, whatever he takes up. He gets tired of it and starts on something fresh." "Such a good fellow, too," remarked the otter reflectively, "but no stability, especially in a boat." From where they sat, they could get a glimpse of the main stream across the island that separated them, and just then a wager boat flashed into view. The rower, a short, stout figure, splashing badly and rolling a good deal, but working his hardest. The rat stood up and hailed him, but Toad, for it was he, shook his head and settled sternly to his work. "He'll be out of the boat in a minute if he rolls like that," said the rat, sitting down again. "Of course he will," chuckled the otter. "Did I ever tell you that good story about Toad and the lockkeeper? It happened this way. Toad, an errant mayfly, swerved unsteadily athwart the current in the intoxicated fashion affected by young bloods of mayflies seeing life. A swirl of water and a cloop, and the mayfly was visible no more. Neither was the otter. The mole looked down. The voice was still in his ears, but the turf whereon he had sprawled was clearly vacant. Not an otter to be seen as far as the distant horizon. But again there was a streak of bubbles on the surface of the river. The rat hummed a tune, and the mole recollected that animal etiquette forbade any sort of comment on the sudden disappearance of one's friends at any moment for any reason or no reason whatsoever. "Well, well," said the rat. "I suppose we ought to be moving. I wonder which of us had better pack the luncheon basket." He did not speak as if he was frightfully eager for the treat. "Oh, please, let me," said the mole. So, of course, packing the basket was not quite such pleasant work as unpacking the basket. It never is. But the mole was bent on enjoying everything, and when he got the basket packed and strapped up tightly, he saw a plate staring up at him from the grass. And when the job had been done again, the rat pointed out a fork which anybody ought to have seen, and hold! The mustard pot, which he had been sitting on without knowing it. Still, somehow, the thing got finished at last, without much loss of temper. The afternoon sun was getting low as the rat sculled gently homewards in a dreamy mood, murmuring poetry things over to himself and not paying much attention to Mole. He was very full of lunch and self-satisfaction and pride, and already quite at home in a boat, so he thought, and was getting a bit restless. Besides, Ratty, please, I want to row now. The rat shook his head with a smile. "Not yet, my young friend," he said. "Wait a second. It's not as easy as it looks." The mole was quiet for a moment or two, but he began to feel more and more jealous of rats strangling so easily along, and his pride began to whisper that he could do it every bit as well. He jumped up and seized the skulls so suddenly that the rat, who was gazing out saying more poetry things to himself, was taken by surprise and fell backwards off his seat with his legs in the air a second time, while the triumphant mole took his place and grabbed the skulls with confidence. "Stop it, you silly ass!" cried the rat from the bottom of the boat. "You can't do it! You'll have us over!" The mole was back with a flourish and made a great dig at the water. He missed the surface altogether, his legs flew up above his head, and he found himself lying on the top of the prostrate rat. Greatly alarmed, he made a grab at the side of the boat, and the next moment, sploosh! Over went the boat, and he found himself struggling in the river. Oh my, how cold the water was, and oh, how very wet it felt. How it sang in his ears as he went down, down, down. How bright and welcome the sun looked as he rose to the surface, coughing and spluttering. How black was his despair when he felt himself sinking again. Then a firm paw gripped him by the back of his neck. It was the rat, and he was evidently laughing. The mole could feel him laughing, right down his arm and through his paw, and so into his, the mole's, neck. The rat got hold of a skull and shoved it under the mole's arm. Then he did the same by the other side of him, and, swimming behind, propelled the helpless animal to shore, hauled him out, and set him down on the bank, a squashy, pulpy lump of misery. When the rat had rubbed him down a bit and wrung some of the wet out of him, he said, "Now then, old fellow, up and down the towing path as hard as you can till you're warm and dry again, while I dive for the luncheon basket." So the dismal mole, wet without and ashamed within, trotted about till he was fairly dry, while the rat plunged into the water again, recovered the boat, and made her fast, fetched his floating property to shore by degrees, and finally dived successfully for the luncheon basket and struggled to land with it. Restart once more. The mole, limp and dejected, took a seat in the stern of the boat, and as they set off, he said in a low voice, broken with emotion, "Ratty, my generous friend, I'm very sorry indeed for my foolish and ungrateful conduct. My heart quite fails me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. Indeed, I have been a complete ass, and I know it. Will you overlook it this once and forgive me, and let things go on as before?" "That's all right, bless you," responded the rat cheerily. "What's a little wet to a water rat? I'm more in the water than out of it most days. Don't you think any more about it, and look here, I really think you had better come up and stop with me for a little time. It's very plain and rough, you know, not like Toad's house at all, but you haven't seen that yet. Still, I can make you comfortable, and I'll teach you how to row and to swim, and you'll soon be as handy on the water as any of us." The mole was so touched by his kind manner of speaking that he could find no voice to answer him, and he had to brush away a tear or two with the back of his paw. But the rat kindly looked in another direction, and presently the mole's spirits revived again, and he was even able to give some straight back talk to a couple of moorhens who were sniggering to each other about his bedraggled appearance. When they got home, the rat made a bright fire in the parlor, and planted the mole in an armchair in front of it, having fetched down a dressing gown and slippers for him, and told him river stories till supper time. Very thrilling stories they were, too, to an earth-dwelling animal like Mole. Stories about weirs and sudden floods, and leaping pike, and steamers that flung hard bottles. At least, bottles were certainly flung, and from steamers, so presumably by them. And about herons, and how particular they were whom they spoke to, and about adventures upstairs, and adventures down drains, and night fishings with otter, or excursions far afield with badger. Supper was a most cheerful meal, but very shortly afterwards a terribly sleepy mole had to be escorted upstairs by his considerate host to the best bedroom, where he soon laid his head on his pillow in great peace and contentment, knowing that his new-found friend the river was lapping the sill of his window. This day was only the first of many similar ones for the emancipated mole, each of them longer and full of interest as the ripening summer moved onward. He learnt to swim and to row, and entered into the joy of running water, and with his ear to the reed sterns he caught, at intervals, something of what the wind went whispering so constantly among them. When I was a kid, me being me, your Aunt Josephine, I read The Wind in the Willows, and it meant a lot to me. I hope it meant something to you too. But it's time to move on now. That story was for my niece or nephew Hubert. This next piece will be for my niece or nephew Dubert. Dubert's very into graphic design, and once upon a time he sent to my email account a PDF of a, quote, breathtaking design strategy, and well, it took my breath away. I'm going to read you some of it now. It's a little bit hard to understand at times, and I'm not sure how it'll translate to a radio setting like this. But, like the people who wrote this, I'm going to try my best. Will you join me? Breathtaking. Trajectory of innovation. How do we move from convention to innovation? By investing in our history and brand ethos, we can create a new trajectory forward. The investment in our DNA leads to breakthrough innovation and allows us to move out of the traditional linear system and into the future. Continued investment provides us with a clear resource for reinvention. The origins of creative endeavors, universal design principles, and PepsiCo's brand heritage. Brand heritage and the aesthetics of simplicity. The Pepsi ethos has evolved over time. The vocabulary of truth and simplicity is a reoccurring phenomena in the brand's history. It communicates the brand in a timeless manner and with an expression of clarity. Pepsi Breathtaking builds on this knowledge. True innovation always begins by investigating the historic path. Going back to the roots moves the brand forward as it changes the trajectory of the future. Universal design principles. Breathtaking is a strategy based on the evolution of 5,000 years of shared ideas in design philosophy, creating an authentic constitution of design. This chart documents the origin and evolution of intellectual property. And then there's like a big swirly thing, a bunch of swirling masses and lines that lead to these dates at the bottom. And I'll read those to you now. 3000 BC. Hindu tradition of numerical harmony as spatial organizer. 600 BC. Pythagoras creates spatial hierarchies from musical scales. 300 BC. Euclid explores the mathematics and proportion of nature. 278 BC. Ancient Chinese art of placement and spatial arrangement. 70 BC. In De Architectura, he demands strong, useful, beautiful. 1452. Alberti draws on the number of relations and areas. 1455. Rediscovery of the Vitruvian principles and their publication. 1637. Descartes develops the Cartesian coordinate system. 1858. Mobius creates a surface with only one side and edge. 1948. Le Corbusier draws algebraic relations in the human body. 2009. Pepsi introduces breathtaking. Iconic geometry. Derived from PepsiCo's rich packaging legacy and inspired by some of its earliest forms and proportions, breathtaking revitalizes the essence of PepsiCo in creating an iconic shape for the brand. And then there's like a bunch of outlines of their different bottles over the years, and then a combined one at the end with a caption that says 1898 to 2009. Retain the best of PepsiCo's history and shape the next PepsiCo bottle into an icon for the brand. Tracing the Pepsi DNA, 1898. 1896 Pepsi Geometries, Perimeter Oscillations. The Pepsi DNA finds its origins in the dynamic of perimeter oscillations. This new identity manifests itself in an authentic geometry that is becoming proprietary to the Pepsi culture. 1905. Oh, then it's just a bunch of images of their logos changing over time. And like a bunch of squiggles to trace them, I guess. It's hard to explain. It's pretty much just that for several pages with their logos. I'm just gonna skip past these. You know what Pepsi looks like. Okay. Towards innovation, projecting Pepsi's future, applying universal laws to establish a blueprint for the brand. Creation of identities, precedents. Artists and architects have proportioned their works to approximate the golden ratio, especially in the form of the golden rectangle, in which the ratio of the longer side to the shorter is the golden ratio. They believe this proportion to be universally and aesthetically pleasing. The golden ratio plays an essential role in human perception of beauty. And then there's an image of the Parthenon. Height and width of the Parthenon is proportioned to yield a golden rectangle. And then there's an image of a face in the Mona Lisa. Leonardo da Vinci studied the proportion of the human face and applied his findings in the Mona Lisa painting. And then there's like an old book and some math. Book format and page layout are based on the golden proportion. And then there's like a shell or something. The diameter of the Nautilus shell increases proportionally with the golden ratio. Creation of identity, a blueprint for proportions. The golden ratio, it starts with a square. The Pepsi ratio, it starts with a circle. Step 1. Draw a circle with diameter d equals a. Find its center and draw two same-size circles with diameter d equals 0.5a. Rotate the center line 45 degrees. Copy one of the smaller circles. Place its center on the intersection of the larger circle and the rotated center line. Draw a circle that lies within the larger one. Its diameter is such that it touches all three circles in exactly and only in one point. Rotate the center line by 56 degrees. Place the smallest circle with its center on the intersection of the largest circle and the rotated center line. The Pepsi brand is created by intersecting circles with a set proportion to each other. The coordinates are marked x. The Pepsi ratio is created by two simpler circles that are in a set ratio to each other, the golden ratio. The Pepsi ratio is aesthetic geometry. Creation of identity. Scales and dynamic relationships. Geometry of aesthetics. Proportion. The golden ratio establishes a proportion of one part, A, relative to another, B. Playing by these rules produces an aestheticism that is universally accepted to be in balance and harmony. The Pepsi aesthetic respects these rules. The brand identity can be derived from two circles that have a set relation to each other. Creation of identity. Dynamic forces. A. The Earth's geodynamo. Geodynamo. A naturally occurring electric generator in fluid motion generates and sustains the Earth's magnetic field. And there's like a diagram of the Earth. And then next to it, A. The Pepsi globe. And then the Pepsi globe. B. Magnetic fields. Magnetic fields exert forces on inner and outer surfaces of the Earth. B. Pepsi energy fields. Symmetrical energy fields are in balance. C. Magnetic dynamics. Magnetic fields are impacted by sun radiation and wind motion. C. The Pepsi globe dynamics. Emotive forces shape the gestalt of the brand identity. Creation of identity. Multiple perspectives. Multiple points of view, one object. And it's like lines to demonstrate that it's actually a circle or something. And then to the other side, there's the Pepsi logo. But each time it's made to look like a face, kind of like laughing. And then they show like another diagram of an actual cartoon face making the same expression to show you that the Pepsi logo is a human face with human feelings. Creation of identity. The face of a new generation. And then it's more of those faces. Creation of identity. A multi-dimensionalized brand. Motion transforms 2D into 3D. A sphere is defined as the surface formed by rotating a circle about any diameter. The brand identity is dimensionalized through motion. Creation of identity. Color theory. Objective color, subjective emotion. Each color on the color wheel is associated with a subjective psychic and emotional value. Therefore, blue equals cool. A slightly different blue is cool fresh. And a yellow is energetic and balanced. And then I tell you folks, I'm reading this verbatim. That first blue that's cool aligns itself with traditional Pepsi. The cool fresh is Pepsi Max. The energetic and balanced yellow is caffeine-free Pepsi. And this gray that is cool, rich, and fresh is Diet Pepsi. And this other kind of gray that is cool, light, and fresh is caffeine-free Diet Pepsi. Breathtaking color palette. The breathtaking color palette is derived using a scientific method of color assignment based on the product's essence and primary features. And that's what I told you. Creation of identity. Gravitational pull. Attraction theory. The Pepsi proposition. Establishment. So in this one, it's in like a door, and on the window it says Bob's Step, which I suppose probably means Bob's Pet since we're looking out through the store window, you know? There's like a bird in a cage, and then a cat with two peg legs, and then a fish in a bowl, but the bowl is labeled Piranha $29.99. Okay, and then in this one, it's like two dudes out fishing, and there's some mountains in the background, and then beyond the mountains, there's some mushroom clouds going off, and one of the fishermen is saying to the other fisherman, "I'll tell you what this means, Norm. No size restrictions, and screw the limit." So then there's this one, and it's two bears in the woods, but standing upright like people, and there's a shotgun in front of them. And one bear is saying to the other bear, "Thunderstick? You actually said thunderstick? That, my friend, is a Winchester 30-06. And then there's this one of this guy sitting in his kind of rundown bedroom, in his kind of rundown apartment. Like, there's like a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling and some smashed picture frames and clothes all over the floor and stuff. And he looks kind of haggard. And there's a chicken sitting on his windowsill. And the caption says, "The bluebird of happiness, long absent from his life, visited by the chicken of depression." And then this one is like pilots in a commercial flight, and one of them is saying over the speakers, "I'm afraid we've got to head back, folks. We've got a warning light on up here. Darn if it isn't the big one." And then behind him there is a giant warning light flashing. And then this one is like this older couple sitting eating dinner, and their dog, that appears to be like an English lab or something, is pointing a pistol at the guy. And he says, "Hey, bucko, I'm through begging." And then this one is a salesperson from the Acme Corporation walking up to a house, and on the fence in front of the house there's a sign that says "Beware of Doug." And you think it's a misspelling because it should say "Beware of Dog," but if you look, there's a dude standing behind a tree looking all creepy in the yard. Probably Doug. And this one's a dude up in heaven. He's got like his wings and stuff and a little halo, and he's sitting on a cloud, and it looks really peaceful and comfortable. And he's thinking to himself, "I wish I'd brought a magazine." And with that, folks, I think it's time that we all hit the hay. Thank you for bearing with me through technical difficulties and everything else. But I just want to say, I know it's been a stressful time for all of you, and you're probably really confused about some things going on in the world right now. And I know you miss your friends from school, and even if you hate school, you probably miss some of the normalcy it brought to your life. There's a lot of things I miss in my life right now, too. But a wise guy once told me, he said, you can't go around it, you gotta go through it. And another guy, approximately as wise, once told me, eyes on the prize. Anyway, I hope this helps you sleep. And if it didn't, fuck me, I guess. No matter what's going on in your life right now, I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. Sincerely. Anyway, I'm tired and this air conditioner's really loud, so I'm going to bed. I hope you all have a good night. Thanks for listening.
I always knew you in your mother's arms. I have called your name. I've an idea placed in your mind to be a better man. I've made a crown for you. Put it in your room, and when the bridegroom comes, there will be noise. There will be glad and a perfect pair. When you write a poem, I know the words, I know the sounds. Before you write it down, when you wear your clothes, I wear them too. I wear your shoes and a jacket too. I always do. In your mother's arms, I've called you son. I've made amends between father and son. Or if you haven't won, rest in my arms, sleep in my bed. There's a design to what I did and said. Rest in my arms, sleep in my bed. There's a design to what I did and said. Rest in my arms, sleep in my bed. There's a design to what I did and said. Rest in my arms, sleep in my bed. Their design to what I did and said. Rest in my arms, sleep in my bed. There's a design to what I did and said. Rest in my arms, sleep in my bed. There's a design. You're not a good dancer.